afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our February Hawkeye and Parent Family webinar series. My name is Danielle Martinez, and I work in academic support and retention, and will be your moderator for today's webinar. If you're new to our webinar series, we hope that they provide you with up-to-date information that can apply to your student's transition, as well as pertinent information about the things that are going on here at campus at the University of Iowa. We know that parents and family members play a vital role into student success, and so we want to make sure that we give you up-to-date information. We're really lucky that we have one of the most amazing financial aid people I have ever worked with at any university, Cindy Cipher, who is the Senior Associate Director in Student Financial Aid and the Office of Student Employment. And today we're going to be talking about maximizing financial aid and looking at filing the FAFSA, or the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, understanding what are some of the important dates that you might want to be thinking out and the verification process, and really understanding how finances can impact student success. So as a reminder, each webinar is recorded and then posted online at the Academic Support and Retention website, so it can be accessed at a later date. Later on, we'll have a question and answer portion, but without further ado, let's get started with our presentation.
I joked with Danielle that I look a little stressed in that picture. And one of the things we want to do is help you not be stressed about this process and make sure that you know that there are a lot of people here on the university campus who are able and willing to help you make sure that the financial aid process goes smoothly. Financial aid can be stressful, and money and budgeting can be stressful. So we want to encourage you to early on be understanding what the costs are and developing a plan to meet those costs, because that will help reduce the stress that can lead to anxiety and inhibiting the academic success of your son or daughter. Developing a budget before the school year starts helps the student learn to live within their financial means. One of the things that we really encourage students to do is to consider getting a student job. And we encourage that for a variety of reasons. Certainly it helps increase their financial resources. But we have really found that students working on campus do better than their non-working peers. They develop transferable skills that they need for the future. It helps them connect to campus. That encourages time management and organizational skills. It increases their retention and graduation rates and their GPA more than what their non-working peers would be. Another thing that we want to encourage through learning about your financial aid and the bill is finding a way to get that bill paid on time. When you pay the bill on time, it eliminates late fees, and it eliminates a student having to worry about being able to register on time for the next semester. So the first thing that you can do to help your student prepare for success is to file that FAFSA to maximize their financial aid. The next thing you can do is to make sure to work with student financial aid staff if you have questions, to make sure that you understand the application process and understand the aid options. The office also employs financial literacy services specialists, and your student can meet with those staff members in order to help develop a budget and better understand their loans. And then in terms of student employment, if your student's having difficulty at all finding a job, we are happy to help them with that. We maintain a system called Hire a Hawk, which is updated daily with student jobs, and the students can contact Student Employment, which is in Calvin Hall, or the Career Center, which is in Pomerantz, the Pomerantz Center, in order to get help with their job search. Now let's talk about some specifics on the FAFSA. The first thing to know is that you can file the FAFSA as soon as possible after January 1st. So hopefully many of you have already filed, but if not, that's what I would encourage you to set time aside for this weekend, to gather the income and other information that you might need and make sure that you get that FAFSA done this weekend. I've listed the website www.fafsa.ed.gov, and I want to make sure that you understand that you can use your 2015 tax estimates. You are not required to have your taxes done. We encourage you to use tax estimates, and that's why people are able to file right away on January 1st. The other thing that is a little bit or something that is a little bit different from last year is last year you would have needed a federal PIN in order to electronically sign that FAFSA. That process has changed. Now you will need what's called an FSA ID to electronically sign the FAFSA. This is new since May of 2015, so you may not have an FSA ID yet. And you can get that once you go on to the FAFSA to start that process. Now, once you file the FAFSA, there are going to be some students and families who are selected for what's called federal verification. And I want to make sure that you know that that doesn't mean that there was anything wrong with your record or that you did anything wrong or that it's anything to be extremely stressed over. What it does mean is that the government has decided, because it's the Department of Education that processes the FAFSA, and it's the Department of Education that establishes who is selected for verification. And what it means is that they are going to need some additional information in order to actually release the financial aid funds to the student. It's not going to slow up the awarding at all to the student, but it will slow up the release. And I have listed the reasons there that students might be selected. We might need to verify the income, and then we would have to get that official information from the IRS. We might need to verify household size, number in college, just a variety of things there. The other thing I want to let you know is that the highest number of our students who are selected for verification are individuals who are awarded the federal Pell Grant. The federal Pell Grant is a need-based grant that is intended for the neediest students, and the federal government wants to make sure that the students receiving that grant are the types of students who it was intended for, the types of students who demonstrate the highest need. And so if you receive communications from either the Department of Education or from the Student Financial Aid Office telling you that you are selected for a verification, you just need to follow through with what's being requested of you. And as soon as the FAFSA is filed and is processed, it's going to be determined at that point if you're selected or not. So you are immediately going to get a email from the Department of Education and from the Office of Student Financial Aid alerting you to that. There are some common errors that create problems for families when they're filing the FAFSA. And so I want to point those out in hopes that you won't have those happen to you. The first and biggest error is that somebody forgets to sign the FAFSA. Either the parent or the student forgets to enter that FSA ID. That error is going to result in the processor not being able to process the form, and so the family is right away going to get an email from both, well, actually, they're right away going to get an email from the federal processor, and the processor is going to tell them that you need to go back in and sign it. So families need to be very mindful of emails and watch for them and then respond to them quickly. Another common error is that when the parents filling out the form, they're thinking more about themselves, and so when they enter information, they enter the same information for themselves and the student. So when the form is asking about the student, they want you to respond to the questions only as it relates to the student. So the student's number in household is going to be 1, number in college is going to be 1, and then the income that they earned to be listed on the FAFSA is going to be just what that student earned during the 2015 year. So then, of course, when the parent is filling it out for the family, then the student's going to be included in that household size number, and the family is going to want to list all of their income and assets. So just be careful when you're filling out the form. Pay close attention to detail. I've worked with families who in the past meant to put $9,000 in child support and they put $90,000. So when you finish filing the FAFSA, you're going to get an email from the processor saying that it's been processed, and it's going to have on there the expected family contribution. If that figure looks very different from what it was the prior year and there's no good reason for it to be different, I would encourage you to go back and look at the FAFSA to see what you entered for all of the information. If you have difficulty understanding that, I would encourage you to call the Office of Student Financial Aid so that we can make sure that the information that you provided for us is correct. Another common error is not responding quickly to emails. Students are going to get emails from the Student Financial Aid Office, and whenever we send the student an email asking for additional information, we're going to be very specific about what we want. We're also going to send a companion email to the parent each time that we send an email to the student. The email to the parent is going to be simpler in nature. It's simply going to say that we've recently sent an email to your student. Please talk with your student about that email. So we hope that between the two of you, we'll make sure that we're connecting one way or another, and that then you respond to us so that we can make sure that whatever information we still need, we get that done. Errors on the FAFSA are going to cause the processor to not calculate what's called the expected family contribution. And that expected family contribution is what we need in order to award financial aid. So we're going to send emails, and the processor is going to send emails if we're not able to move forward with that FAFSA. So if you can, as soon as you get that email, respond to it, then we'll be able to get it corrected so that we can award financial aid by our priority deadline. Families do experience special circumstances, things that the FAFSA itself doesn't really take into consideration. The FAFSA is asking for some black and white kind of numbers, and things aren't always black and white. And so we want to make sure that you know that the Student Financial Aid Office is here to help you with that. There can be circumstances that occur, like a reduction in income. There could be one-time income on a tax return, maybe a capital gain, but it really is more a gain on paper than it is in real money. There could be high medical expenses, there could be a marriage or a divorce, or unfortunately there could even be a death in the family. And so those are things that you need to make sure to let the Student Financial Aid Office know so that we can help you with that. There are also a couple of things that we get questions about, but we really are not able to make any adjustments on. So they would not be really considered an special circumstance as it relates to financial aid adjustments. Those could be high credit card debt or private educational costs that you are responsible for younger siblings. So in terms of awarding, we award our financial aid on a first-come, first-served basis, and grants and scholarships are limited. That's why it's so important to get the FAFSA done now, so that when we do start making our awards, we've not run out of that money. Scholarships are limited to 8 semesters, so if your son or daughter received a scholarship their first year, they would have received 2 of those 8 semesters and would be eligible for 3 more years of renewal, assuming that they meet all the renewal criteria. So it's also important to work with your student to keep that 4-year graduation rate in sight, and hopefully that will be a goal that they can reach before their scholarship money would run out. We always award grants and scholarships first. Then if the student is interested in work study, they're going to need to indicate that on the FAFSA, and then they would be awarded that next. And then last, we would be awarding the loans. Work study, in case you are not certain of what that means, is a student employment program. It's a program that is funded through the federal government, so it is considered financial aid and might reduce a student's eligibility for other financial aid, but it would only be for the loans. In terms of awards, we're going to make our first awards that first week in March, and would be notifying students and parents by email that they can go out to ISIS to view the award notice. So I would encourage you, if you've got your FAFSA submitted or you submit it this weekend like we talked about, to be watching for that email that first week in March, and then go out and look on ISIS. And if you see anything that is not what you were expecting, maybe the student thought they were going to get work study and they didn't, maybe they thought they were going to get a scholarship and they didn't, to contact our office right away so that we can help you get that resolved. The other thing that I keep saying, and I can't emphasize enough, is just the need to file early, because once we do make those first awards on March 1st, after that we are basically going to be out of money except for the federal Pell Grant and loans. And so in order to put your student in the running for those limited grants and scholarships, you need to make sure to get the FAFSA filed early. Scholarships that were awarded at the point of admission by the admissions office are renewable. And so you can go out to the admissions office website, and I provided their link there, in order for you to know what those renewal criteria are. Some examples might be the National Scholars Award if a student is a non-resident, or the Iowa Scholar Award if they are a resident. Many of those admission scholarships will require a UI cumulative GPA of 2.0 for renewal. Some of them will require a 3.0. So it's important to go out and know what the scholarship criteria are so that your student can make sure to meet those. The Office of Student Financial Aid awards a scholarship called the Upper Class Tuition Scholarship, and that is awarded based both on merit and financial need. So to qualify for that, a student has to have a UI GPA of 3.0 along with demonstrating financial need and applying early. Now, some of your students may have received our freshman tuition scholarship for this year, and that would have been based on their high school record. That is not renewable as a freshman scholarship. It's renewable as an upper class scholarship, and for that, then they'll be reviewed based on their UI GPA. Students are also encouraged to explore other scholarship opportunities on our new Iowa Scholarship Portal. That is a system that was just brought up this school year, so different colleges and departments are putting their scholarship information in there now, and I've given you the web link to look at that, so I would encourage you to do that with your student. When we go to award financial aid, we're going to be looking first at what the student's financial need is, and the way we determine that is to take the expected family contribution that was processed and determined through the FAFSA, and that expected family contribution is going to vary based on the number of students that you have in college. So if you have more than one student in college, that EFC is going to be split amongst your students. Then the university knows what the cost will be. We determine the cost of attendance based on working with housing and dining to determine their costs. We do a survey with our students based on books and supplies, based on what they might be spending for personal and transportation. So we use all that information to determine what we think it's going to cost a student to attend the University of Iowa, and those costs will be different if the student is living on or off campus. And I've provided you our web link for where you can look at the cost, but we'll also have a screen next that we're going to be going over those costs in detail. And then the way we get to the financial need is to take the cost and subtract that expected family contribution. Now, eligibility for scholarships and grants and for some of the loans is going to be based on that financial need figure. Then there are other loans where the eligibility is based on what would be considered the remaining cost of attendance. What is left on that cost of attendance after the other financial aid has been applied. That portion then could be awarded through what's called a Parent Plus loan. Sometimes when the family receives their expected family contribution, they might look at that and say, that's really more than I can afford to give to my son or daughter. And the plus loan is something that can be used to basically replace that expected family contribution. There are also things that your son and daughter can look at in terms of minimizing their costs that would help reduce what we need to take out in loans. But the parent loan is there to help with that as well. Now, in terms of the cost, when your son or daughter was here this first year, many of them were living on campus. And some of them will choose to live on campus next year as well, but many of them will be moving off campus. So when we looked at financial aid and you looked at it in terms of determining how much you might need to borrow, it's really important, I think, to consider what the billed expenses are, what the university is going to bill you and what you owe to the university when you're looking at how much you want to take out in a loan. I would encourage you to borrow what you would need for those billed expenses as opposed to what we would consider the estimated expenses. So for billed expenses, the student will have the tuition and fees if they were living in the residence halls and the housing and meals. Now, the housing and meals is an estimate for a student, our average student living in a double room, but many of our students might have other costs than that, in that they might have chosen the full meal plan, they might have chosen a single room, so those costs may vary. So it's best to look at your student's housing contract to know what their costs actually are. Then we have our estimated expenses. Those are not something that you pay to the university. And I have taken calls from families before wondering where they can pay those expenses. So just know that those are expenses really that your son or daughter may have, but they're dealing with them outside of the university. All of our students are going to have books, obviously. Then for personal expenses, those are things that your student may or may not have very much of depending on their own spending habits. And then transportation. The transportation allotment there may fit very well in terms of students who are Iowa residents or students living in states bordering Iowa. But if your student happens to be from the East or the West Coast, those costs may be not enough and you may need to request an increase there. But just know that if you do request an increase, probably the only option to cover that increase is the loans. You can see that overall the costs are pretty close to being the same whether the student lives on or off campus, but they will vary in the individual components. So we actually think that housing and meals may cost a student less to live off campus. But again, that will vary based on the apartment that student chooses and their own spending habits in terms of meals. We think their personal expenses may be higher than they would be on campus though, because they're going to have things like cable and internet that they're paying for that they wouldn't have otherwise paid for. So it's just important to go through that with your student when you're developing the student's budget and looking at the amount of loans to borrow. Something that's really important, I think, for the family to think about is how can you minimize those costs? Now, your students, as we talked about, are all going to have books, but they could choose to buy used books or they could choose to rent books, and students can rent books from a variety of places. Students can rent from Amazon. My own students, for example, rented from a place called Chegg, C-H-E-G-G. I want you to know I don't get a kickback on that. I'm just giving it to you as an option of something that worked well for my own students. They could also talk to peers and might be able to buy a used book from a peer. Personal and transportation, again, are estimates, and there's a lot of ways that students can choose to reduce that. Students can be very frugal and just not spend much on personal expenses. We often think that personal and transportation are something that a student can actually get the resources to cover through their student employment job, because with student employment, they're being paid for their job every 2 weeks for the hours that they've worked during that time period. And again, when we had talked about when you were calculating what to borrow, to choose to use either the tuition and then the housing and meals if the student is living on campus, and if not, what you actually know their budgeted cost for that is going to be. Now, in terms of dispersing the financial aid, when we disperse the financial aid, that federal verification comes into play, and we had talked about how it would not hold up the awarding, but it will hold up getting the student's financial aid released. We'd also talked about how we're going to start notifying the student as soon as the FAFSA arrives if the student is selected for verification. And we're going to continue those reminders throughout the spring semester and the summer. Now, your big reminder is going to come when you see that August bill, because if the student hasn't completed the federal verification, the financial aid isn't going to be displayed there. So you're going to know that something's wrong, and you're going to contact our office. But what we'd like to be doing is working with you long before that on what you need to do in order to get the verification done. The verification can be a stumbling block, and we just would like to make sure that it's not one for you. And if you have questions in terms of how you need to go about getting that income information, if you have difficulty requesting it through the IRS, you just need to have your student come into the office and meet with somebody or call our office, and we would sit down with the student and can even help them request the information directly from the IRS website. When we go to disperse the financial aid, we're first going to make sure that the university bill is paid off. So we're going to, for students living in the residence halls, we're going to hold out enough financial aid to cover their tuition fees, housing, and meals. For students who are living off campus, we're going to only hold out enough financial aid to cover their tuition. The majority of the students' costs who are off campus may be those off-campus living expenses. So we need to make sure that they have the money to pay those. And the best way to get that money to the student quickly is to set up direct deposit on ISIS. And so I've given you the path there. If the student logs into ISIS, they're going to select student records. Then under the Finances and Billing tab, they're going to select Bank Information Refund Account, and they're going to enter the bank information. Now the parent who applies for a PLUS loan can also set up direct deposit, but that is a paper form that they have to get from the billing office website. There is not an online form to do that. And that will help in so many ways, because if we send out a paper check, it can take a couple of weeks for the family to get the paper check, either the student or the parent. But if you set up direct deposit a couple of days after classes have started, the student is going to have that money in their bank account. So I've emphasized several times that I want you to take advantage of the financial aid office. That's why we're here. So I want to leave you with our contact information. You've got our website. You may be able to answer some of your questions just on our website. Your student is always welcome to visit the office during our office hours. You can email the office and you can call. We have financial aid counselors who are available to meet in person with the student or to talk with you or the student on the phone. Many times we'll get emails from students very late at night, because that's when they're up and they're thinking about things like financial aid or other things. And so they'll send us an email and we'll be able to respond to them the next day. And you are welcome to do that as well. I also want to let your student know how to set up a meeting with a financial literacy services specialist to talk about budget counseling or loan counseling. So I've given you the link there, and they can set up a meeting directly through ISIS. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Cindy. That was a lot of information and a lot of great resources in terms of navigating the process. We want to open it up to questions to see if there's anything from our viewers today. And so we have a question around folks who are interested in what happens if they have like a life-changing event after they've already submitted their FAFSA.
That's a great question, and unfortunately that does happen. You file the FAFSA early on in January and then something changes. The best way to work with that is to contact the Student Financial Aid Office so that we can understand what the change is and then what we can do to help you. It could be that it's been a change in income, and then we have to verify how significant that change is, because it has to be a reduction of at least 20% in order for us to make a change on that. And then we would work with you to have you complete what's called a financial need appeal form so that you can give us projections for what your 2016 income is going to be as opposed to your 2015. It could be that there's been a change in marital status, and maybe we would need copies of W-2s in order to be able to break out the income for each parent. It could be that there's been a death, and then we need to break that income information out as well. So depending on the individual circumstance, we'll be able to help you know what to do next. So please just give us a call.
So as you were talking about making FAFSA with estimates, we have some questions about when do people need to submit the final information on their FAFSA?
Okay. What I might encourage you to do is first to wait and see if you are selected for verification. Because if you are selected for verification, you're going to receive information from the Department of Education and from the Financial Aid Office letting you know what you need to do to resolve that and how to provide the income information to us. If you haven't been selected for verification, unless the income information is going down, in the vast majority of cases, we find that when families use estimates, they do a pretty accurate job, but if things are going to change, they're probably going to change up. And I might encourage you to just wait until the first awards occur in March 1st, and then after that time, get that finalized tax information into us, and then we can make changes if we have to. The reason I say that is that I've worked with some families in the past who filed the FAFSA right away in January. Then they went back in to update it with their finalized tax information, and somebody forgets to sign it. So then it goes back into that limbo state where it actually isn't finalized. And they don't realize that it's not finalized until after we've made our first awards on March, and then the student loses out on things. So it's almost better to just wait a little bit. Now, if the income turns out to be considerably less than what you projected, then we want to encourage you to go in quickly, make that change, make sure that you sign it, make sure that it goes all the way through and is a finalized form, so that we can make sure when we're awarding the student, we're awarding on that lowest income and the highest financial need possible.
And so folks want to know if their estimated family contribution is already available on ISIS.
The expected family contribution actually is not on ISIS. It would not be displayed for you to see until the student was awarded and you were going in and looking in the award notification. So what I would suggest in that case, though, is you should have gotten an email from the federal processor after the FAFSA was processed and an expected family contribution was determined. And in that email, you should have been able to see the results. You can also go out to your FAFSA record, go back out to the www.fafsa.ed.gov and look at the FAFSA record. But if you're having difficulty, just call the office.
And so if a student was awarded work study, but they can't find a job, are there campus resources besides the p.m.as Career Center that they could look at?
Yes, and I'm pleased to hear that question because we still have some work study jobs that have not been filled yet for this semester. So if your student was awarded work study for this school year and is still interested in finding a job, the first thing I would encourage them to do is to go out to Hire a Hawk. It's at www.hireahawk.com. That's the system that we use to advertise our jobs. They'll click on student employment. We update jobs on there Monday through Friday, and they can see what the different opportunities are. Now, if they're having difficulty using the system or knowing how to apply for the jobs, they can come into room 213, Kelvin Hall. That's where student employment is. Or they can certainly go to the p.m.as Career Center. But first, we can make sure in Kelvin Hall that the student understands how the system works and how to search for jobs. Then if the student needs help completing the general application or creating a resume, which they might need in order to apply for the job, either student employment staff or the p.m.as Career Center staff can help them.
And then how does a student even know if they've been awarded work study?
That's a great question. Work study actually can be very confusing to the student because they're all working and they're all studying and they all think they're work study. But it is a federal financial aid program, and sometimes students are not awarded work study, even though they've asked for it. Maybe we're out of money. So the easiest place to start is to go out to ISIS, and under the financial aid heading, they would be able to look at their award letter and see if work study is on it. Now, if work study is not on it, but they still want to work, I would reassure them that there are going to be a lot of jobs that they can look for. We have probably around 7,000 students who work each year on campus under student employment, where the employer pays 100% of their wage. Then we have about 1,000 students who are working under the work study program, where the employer pays half of their wage and the federal work study program pays the other half. So if a student doesn't have work study, it does not mean at all that they can't find a job. There will be lots of other opportunities for them.
And our last question for today from somebody is if their student has already set up direct deposit in their first year, do they need to do it every semester or every year, or is it just a one-time shot?
It is a one-time shot in terms of the direct deposit, but the only thing I would caution there is that we have two different direct deposit options. One is direct deposit through payroll, and students who are working a job do have to set up direct deposit through payroll. And then we have direct deposit through the billing office. So sometimes students their first year may think that they had done direct deposit because they have a job and they have done it for payroll, but they haven't done it for billing yet. So you want to make sure that you've done it in both places if you have a job and you also want to direct deposit your financial aid.
Well, that is all the time we have for today. Thank you so much to Cindy Cipher for joining us. Just a reminder that all of our webinars are posted online at uc.uiowa.edu/family-resources. And if you have additional questions, you can reach out to the Office of Student Financial Aid or to Academic Support and Retention at uc-retention@uiowa.edu for a response from a university staff member. Please join us for our next month's webinar, which is Academic Support Resources, which will be on Friday, March 4th from noon to 1. And we hope you have a great rest of your Friday. On Iowa, go Hawks!